Job hunting. It's probably the most frustrating thing I've ever had to do in this whole journey of starting to work in tech. I went to data science boot camp in 2019, and before that, I had no experience in tech, no experience working full-time, no experience in working in the corporate industry, any corporate industry. So I'm going to talk about my experience. I'm going to kind of deconstruct the job hunt, talk about my top 5 tips, and try to help people who are totally new to tech understand the things that you have to think about and consider when you start a job hunt. So this is less about, tips and tricks about resumes and applications and networking, but more about a personal perspective, maybe kind of philosophical, big picture way to think about tech and how to start thinking about the job hunt. So just a quick note is that this is just my personal experience and I'm no expert. When I started to get into tech, I had just went to a boot camp, and then my experience before this was I was an artist, so I did a lot of gig economy jobs like food delivery, babysitting. I was a waiter, just a lot of random things in the gig economy. So I know what the hustle is like, but getting into corporate tech industry was just a whole different thing altogether. So I'm going to talk through the thought processes that I went through and just my advice and takeaways. So I did write an article about this. You can also read it online and it's going to be linked below, but just starting with my top 5 tips. So the first one is a major one. Don't try to apply to FANG companies just because you think they're prestigious or just because you like those companies. Many people apply to FANG companies because of the prestige and money, the allure of the cool companies, but it's a waste of time because really if you're brand new to tech, you will have a hard time getting into those companies without experience. So just don't waste your time. The other thing is that FANG companies tend to be highly sought after, so you're fighting for these positions with much more experienced candidates. So in that way, I also think it's a waste of time. But the major thing is that you have to interrogate your own desires and your own prejudices when it comes to companies. I realized in my search that I was just wanting to go there because I knew of Apple and I knew of Google and I knew of Netflix, and so that's all I kind of knew. So I had to start realizing and learning on my own, doing the research to find other companies that existed and not just cling on to the idea of, wow, prestigious FANG company, I'll be making boatloads of money. That's not really the case. So the last thing about FANG companies is that, there's loads of different types of companies. There's the FANG companies, Facebook, Amazon, Google, Netflix. There's those type of companies and they're very large. And there's other type of companies like startups who are typically kind of small. There's medium-sized companies. There's for-profit companies and non-profit companies. And then there's government. So there's all these different choices out there. And it's good to start thinking about what are the pros and cons of each of those things. The thing with FANG companies is that, you should only really be trying to apply to a FANG company if you're trying to, first, if you have enough experience, 3, 4, 5 years experience. Secondly, if you're trying to get a research-oriented job, the FANG companies are the only place, for the most part, that these special types of positions exist at. So, in other words, didn't really explain that good. There are only certain types of positions in certain types of companies. For example, FANG companies are typically the only type of companies that will have research R&D departments that are really large and employ like groups of people just to do R&D research and development, like developing new algorithms and stuff like that. So unless you're like have a PhD and you're trying to do that specific job, there's really no point in applying to FANG companies, because you can do like a data analyst or business analyst or a data scientist position in loads of other places. There's also, specific to data science, there are, the people who build and make algorithms, and then there's people who use those algorithms, apply them to everyday life, the real world. So if you are trying to get into the R&D, building new algorithms, then definitely look at FANG companies where you can work on those type of teams. But otherwise, everyone else is just using the algorithms they make and they apply it to the real world. So you don't need to be working at FANG companies in order to do this. In my experience, I felt like I wasted a lot of time because I was just so clinging to the idea of working at a FANG company for all the wrong reasons. The next thing has to do with finding the right company for you. And it has to do with ethics and values. So my advice is that don't apply to companies that you don't agree with in terms of ethics and values. For example, for me, it came down to things like not wanting to work at a place like Uber or like BlackRock, places that I simply don't agree with their ethics and values, the things they do as a company. This might take a lot of research to kind of know, especially if you're totally new to the field and you don't really know about different companies that much, but it does take your research. It's up to you to find out what the ethics and values of a company are. It's up to you to kind of ask yourself, what are your ethics and values? And only apply to a place where you can truly see your values aligning and where you truly see good company practices, good work culture, good work-life balance, or whatever it is that you value. That's really important, and it's hard to address because there are so many different companies out there. There's kind of not a lot of transparency, but asking yourself what your ethics and values are is the first step, and it'll help you kind of weed out places that you do not want to work at. And again, for me, that was really big issues at certain companies that I just couldn't, I just can't agree with them, and I couldn't see myself working there. So my third piece of advice is this: only pick job titles that are suitable for your experience and your skills. So pick 3, 4, or 5 job titles that are good for you, good enough for you. And you also have to have a certain kind of idea of what a career projection or trajectory might look like. For example, for me, I started off as a junior developer. I went from that to a front-end software developer or software engineer to a business analyst to a data engineer. So my desired field, data science, becoming a data scientist, it still hasn't technically happened yet, but I'm kind of on the way. I'm on a path towards getting there. And so at the beginning, when you're totally new, you have to kind of be realistic, think about a group of job titles that are suitable for you, and don't really waste your time applying to jobs that are outside of there, especially if they are, if you're totally new and they include senior or lead in the job title. That'll save you a bunch of time. Just having a clear set of requirements will enable you to do the job hunt more effectively. So get those job titles set. The next piece of advice is really just pragmatic. It'll help you, again, get your job hunt requirements set. I recommend people to only search for jobs in the place that they currently live or in places that they can really realistically live. Don't apply for far-flung places that you wish you could really live at, because the truth is, when you're in the beginning stages, when you have little experience, getting to a new city, getting a job in a new city is going to be very hard with such little experience. So when I started my job hunt after boot camp, I did search everywhere. I was searching in LA, New York, two places I kind of wanted to live, and Austin, different places. I got a few phone interviews, but nothing really worked out. I ended up getting a job in my hometown through a local co-working space on their Slack channel. So I think it's in your best interest to save time. Just apply to jobs where you currently live or it's most realistic you can live. My last piece of advice really has to do with professional identity. So job hunting, it's extremely hard. It's so hard and it's frustrating, and there's so many tricks and tips out there. But when I started this whole process, I was totally new to the field, very kind of insecure and not knowing what was going to happen to me. But because I went to the boot camp, I was kind of shown techniques. I was groomed in a way to become a data scientist. And so calling myself a data scientist on LinkedIn, for example, was something we needed to do. But of course it was kind of like, I don't feel comfortable doing this, am I even a data scientist? But the whole journey and process for me was about getting to a place where I begin to craft my professional identity, whatever that is, in a deeper philosophical sense. Like, who you are is always complex and multifaceted. But in the professional sense, you have to start somewhere. So I started in boot camp, and we started to call ourselves data scientists because we graduated from a data science boot camp. And of course, getting to that place where I feel like I can call myself a data engineer took a bunch of time and experience. But when you're doing the job hunt, it also takes a bunch of research and responsibility on your part to do the research about where it is you're going to start off in your career trajectory, your career path, and then honing those skills, taking responsibility and ownership of your professional image or identity, putting it out there and crafting it in such a way that it not only helps you out, it also lets other people see the potential in you or see who you are in a professional sense. So, you always have to be ready with professional images, good LinkedIn, good resume. What I'm suggesting is that crafting your professional identity is just as important because it helps build that self-confidence. It helps craft, what is your career path? What are the skills you have? That self-knowledge is going to get you to a place where you can own that professional identity, and it's definitely helpful. That's it. Read my article in medium.com if any of this did not make sense. I hope this is helpful, and check out my blog as well.